Welcome back on the show. It is time for our quality time interview and opportunity to spend a little extra time with our next guest, Brett Westrup, the head coach of the South Central football team, and joining us now. Hey, coach, thanks for coming on the show. And now, several days and several weeks removed from that state championship performance for South Central, what's the feeling like for you? Have you kind of settled back into reality?
Yeah, one, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be able to be on this. But yeah, you're able to really kind of sit back and focus and reflect. When you first win that state championship game, um, on Saturday, Sunday, and I was even maybe 3, 4, 5 days into the week, the next week, you didn't get to embrace everything that you've done throughout the whole season. It's all the excitement and everything that happened during the game. You're state champs, and then you get to be able to sit back and really focus on, what we did to get there. And that, I think that's one of the areas that I've really kind of enjoyed, is looking back and the things we've gone through to get where we were.
How much of a grind is that? I mean, because you talk about, all the extra football, starting up, whether it's summer with camps, but, especially, let's say August with, once practice starts, and then you go through 13 full weeks of football. How much of a grind is that, even when you're winning?
Yeah, so like I told you a little bit ago, this is just my fourth time coaching high school football, fourth year. I was a middle school football coach at South Central for 12 years prior to that, and I was actually a high school football official for 12 years, and so I didn't really. Before I took the job, talked to other coaches and stuff like that, and wanted to know, what time commitment it took to be a successful high school football coach. I didn't want to just go through the motions. I wanted to make sure I was either both feet in or both feet out. And it was a lot more time commitment than I actually anticipated. But it's a good type of commitment. We start weights the end of May, 1st of June. We lift 3 days a week. And then we don't have our team camp until as late as we can in July. So we have that team camp, and then we lift at the end of July. And then we give the kids about 2 weeks off, and then we start football. And then there in August, we start practice. And then one of the things that I do is we have freshman weights in the morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, because freshmen, they can have PE class, but during that PE time, it can't be weights. So I'm not a teacher, so I'm just a Rule 10 coach. So I go to the school at 6:30 in the mornings. We have freshman weights 3 days a week. Are you still there? Sorry. So it's a lot more time commitment than I first anticipated. But, I've got one of the things I've been able to reflect on after the state champion is, all the people that it took to get to that state title. And I think one of the people for me that deserves some of the most big credit is my wife. She's a huge supporter of me, and I'm a girl dad, and I have 4 daughters. And so I do miss a lot of their things because of sports. Every Thursday morning we have 6 a.m. practice, so I can go watch junior high girls volleyball. And the boys are just fine with that. They've bought into that. We've done that for the last 4 years. And, after junior high volleyball season is over, they can want to continue to have 6 a.m. practice. And it doesn't matter if it's 30 degrees. They want to have that 6 a.m. practice. And so, one of the biggest supporters for me has been my wife, and helping me be successful the way we are. They know that September 1st to hopefully the end of March, or excuse me, not March, from September 1st to the end of November, I'm going to spend 8, maybe 10 hours a week sitting on the couch watching game film. And, somebody asked me a couple of weeks ago after we won state, they said, well, what are you going to do with all your time now? I said, I didn't even realize I had a wife and kids, because, you just spend so much time in the grind and getting ready for practice and game prep and film that, you kind of neglect your family a little bit. But I've got a great family that supports me just as much.
You mentioned, making that switch 4 years ago from going from middle school to high school as far as coaching, and you wanted to make sure both feet were in. Once you decide, okay, both feet are in for high school, what were some of the biggest differences from just coaching at, the middle school level to high school level?
I think I tell everybody, if anybody out there wants to be a coach, the best sport out there to coach is junior high football because it's 7 weeks long. Here at South Central, because we're a consolidated school, we don't have school on Fridays, and so there's no practice on Fridays. You practice Monday through Wednesday. You have games on Thursday, and it's over after 7 weeks. You have 2 weeks of practice before that, so it's 9 weeks long. And that's the best sport out there to practice because there's no weights, there's no JV games, and there's no film. And I think that's one of the biggest areas, the big difference for me of going from the junior high level to the high school level is that time commitment in the summer of the weights. Playing high school football and a little bit in college at Sterling, as a kid, you didn't realize the time commitment. You just went to weights and, then you went home. But now the summer weights is a huge time commitment. And then the film prep, man, that's the one thing I think that probably took me by surprise the most, that if you want to be good, successful, you have to be ready. And just the amount of hours, I'm talking, 8, maybe 10 hours a week, 2-3 hours every evening watching film. And that's probably the biggest difference for me from going from the junior high level to the high school level.
When you watch film, like, did it come natural to you, like the first time you ever, whether as a player or as a coach, like just to like what you were looking for? Because I think a lot of people, like, average Joes will watch some film and you're like, okay, well, that team looked good, but like to break things down, did that always come natural to you?
No, absolutely not. No, not at all. I my first year, I found myself watching the game, not watching. So I call the offense. And so I wasn't sitting there watching the defense on, are they in man coverage? Are they in zone coverage? If they're in a 3-man front, are they in a 4-man front? Are they bringing a linebacker when they're a 3-2? If they're in a 3-3 stack, are they dropping a linebacker? Are they, they bring in the uncovered linebacker? Are they going to bring the middle linebacker? My first year, I was not watching that. I found myself just watching film, just watching the game, watching the ball, just like every fan in the stands is a better official than the officials that are out there because all they do is watch the play. They don't watch what happens on the backside. I found myself watching film that way as I just watched the game. I didn't try to decipher what the defense was doing and how we were going to take advantage of that on offense. So my second year, that's probably where I got the biggest improvement, is breaking down film and actually trying to figure out coverages. Are they they in a 3 high 2 under, or they, if they're in a 3-3 stack, are they going to run man coverage, and just trying to figure out different formations. We have about 8 different formations, and watching other teams are like, that play right there is very similar to what we run here. What are they going to do? Are they going to bring somebody off the edge? They're going to man you up. They're going to look like it's man and drop the zone. So that's one of the areas that I probably got the most improvement in myself personally, is between my first and second year, is actually breaking down film. Because like I said, I was never a high school assistant coach. And so I went straight from junior high to a head high school. So I had nobody teaching me anything. I had to literally learn from mistakes. And I just kind of self-taught, I guess, and learned from mistakes and got my butt kicked plenty of times my first year.
Well, it worked out really well. Brett Westrup joining us here, head coach of the South Central football team, coming off that state championship this past fall. All right, so I think it's kind of easier for me to see, like, with your 4th year now. So you started with those freshmen that are now seniors now. Like, could you see the maturation of those guys and what could be like 4 years ago?
To be honest, no. So I had this year's senior class and this year's junior class. They were the last team I had when I was a junior. I had head coaches. This year's seniors were 8th graders. This year's juniors were 7th graders, and we had a really good junior high year. We just flat dominated everybody in junior high, but there's such a huge difference in junior high kids, and you're picking from just such a small area in Kansas in our league that there's so many other good schools out in the state besides this Iroquois league. And when I decided to take the job, the job opening came open in November, and I was actually headed to go ref a high school football game in Hooker, Oklahoma when the job opening came out. And I had multiple people text me and say, "Hey, the high school football job's open. You really need to take it." And I remember sitting on that football field that night down there in Hooker, and I loved officiating. When I get done coaching, I'm going back to the stripes. I'm going back to the dark side. And I remember sitting there on Hookers, looking up the lights, 11-man football games, like, I'm not giving this up. And then I didn't end up accepting the job until April, but I remember specifically Jack Hurd saw me at Santa Claus Day in December before I accepted the job. And he said, Coach, you've got to take it, because if you take it, we're going to win state when I'm a senior. And I thought, this dude's crazy. He's crazy. Like, he doesn't even know what the rest of the state has. He's crazy, And so he is. And, did I 4 years ago, did I dream of this? No. My goal as being a high school football coach is, I've got 4 team goals for our team. And I tell them every year at Parents' Night. The first, number one, is we're here to get an education first. School comes first. If we can't pass classes, that classroom's going to take you a lot farther than this grass will. We're here to get an education. Number 2, we're here to develop into better young men. I hope that these kids grow up into better young men. I hope that I can maybe guide them a little bit down the road. Not saying that I'm perfect, but maybe just give them a little bit of guidance. I want people in the community to come to me and say, hey, you know what? I saw such and such open the door for this lady down at the grocery store. I saw this guy, I saw him picking up trash. I saw them carrying a lady's groceries out at the store or whatever, So that's number 2. We want to become better students, develop into better young men. We want to build a better understanding from the game of football, because I'm a firm believer, if you're not growing, you're dying. And so we want to get better each year. And that doesn't mean you have to win a state title. That just means you get better throughout the week and just get better. And then number 4, ultimately, is we're here to win, and we want to win the state title.
Well, able to accomplish that this year. I mean, you talk about just getting the playoffs, and you push your way through the regular season, and then you get to those playoffs where, you didn't have as many contested games in the regular season. Like, what was it like when that intensity ratchets up, and then you have some of those closer games like Hill City and Wichita County, or even the Oberlin game?
Oh, absolutely. I think we maybe had the hardest road to state out of anybody, having to go through Oberlin, Decatur Community, Leota, and then Hill City. But, one of the games that I think a lot of people don't know about is because we're way down here in south central Kansas. We're 13 miles off the Oklahoma state line. And one of the teams that we played for the last 2 years is Laverne, Oklahoma. And that team, that name probably doesn't mean much to a lot of people. But Laverne, Oklahoma, they played in the state title game this year and lost by 8. They played in the state title game last year, and I don't know what the score was, but they lost last year. And up until this year, they played in the state title game in Oklahoma 7 out of the last 11 years and won, I think, 5 of those. And so going into my 3rd year, so last year we had an opening week 3. And I was talking to our AD, and he's like, we don't have a week 3 game open. We don't have a week 3. We're open that week. I'm having a real hard time finding anybody to play us. Got any ideas? I said, well, I have some connections in Oklahoma, because I officiated also in Oklahoma and Kansas. And the way Oklahoma works is the officials are signed by the ADs. In Oklahoma, they don't have league commissioners. So I knew about 8 or 9 different ADs down in Oklahoma. I said, give me about 2 days. I'm going to call a bunch of ADs and see if they'll play us. And so I called multiple schools. They're like, no. So I called Laverne, Oklahoma, and I called Brett Trippett, the AD down there. And I was like, hey, we're open week 3. Would you be willing to play us? He's like, yes, we're open too. I'm like, sweet. So then a lot of people found out that South Central is going to play Laverne, Oklahoma, a team that, like I said, I think they played in the state title game 7 out of the last 11 years and won 5 of those. We're like, why are you playing Laverne, Oklahoma? I'm like, why not? Why, if we want to learn something about ourselves, let's go play the best. We can't play the best in Kansas unless we make it to the state title game, and that's not even guaranteed. Let's go play the best in Oklahoma, where we can learn something. If you lose, you're like, that's what a good team looks like. If you want to be a good team, that's what we need to do. You can look how big they are, how strong they are, how physical they are, they are one of the most fundamentally sound teams I think I've ever coached against. X's and O's, great coaching staff. And if you want to be a good team, that's what it plays. So if you lose, you learn something. If you win, hey, we can hang with anybody, because we just beat Laverne, Oklahoma. And we turned around and we beat them 60-44 last year, and we beat them 44-0 this year. And so that was one of the reasons. Yeah, we had some games in our regular season that weren't real tough, but that game right there prepared us for what was going to be coming in the playoffs. And then that gauntlet of teams we had to play in the playoffs, it was just brutal. I made a comment to somebody after we played Hill City that I'm like, golly, I hope Lincoln is not a wrestling school because I am tired of playing wrestling schools. We played Hoxie last year. We played Oberlin, Leota, Hill City, some of the top 4 wrestling schools in the small divisions of Kansas. I am ready to be done with wrestlers. Let's go play somebody else besides wrestlers.
You have to think about that when you're putting together your schedule in the future. Hey, Coach, appreciate the time. Congrats, and hopefully you're not in a referee uniform anytime soon. You got a lot of years left coaching. All right.
Well, appreciate it. Thank you.
That is Brett Westrup, the head coach of the South Central football team, joining us for our quality time interview.